8 years ago, I had 6 miscarriages in a row, and today I finally found out why. This is a story about advocating for your medical rights and for your health, and the importance of asking for a second opinion, a third opinion, a fourth opinion, if you are not getting the care that you are asking for, and if somewhere inside of you, you know there is something else going on. So back in 2017, I fell pregnant for the first time, and 7.5 weeks later, I miscarried. Now, at that point in time, the doctors said to me, "Don't worry, it's unfortunate, but it happens. 1 in 4 pregnancies end this way. There's no need to do any additional testing. Just try again." And over the subsequent 2 years, I had 5 more miscarriages, all between 5 and 8 weeks gestation. And each time I experienced this, I was told, "You're just having bad luck. There's nothing wrong with you. You're fine. You can get pregnant. So you just have to keep trying." It wasn't until my 5th miscarriage that they finally did some basic genetic testing, which came back all clear. My husband had already had a semen analysis done, and that looked fine as well. So as far as they were concerned, it was just random bad luck. And my 6th and final miscarriage was probably the most traumatic experience of them all. So if you're currently going through a miscarriage or have recently gone through one, this is your warning to skip through, because this gets pretty upset. So when I was about 6 weeks pregnant, I went away on a girls' trip with some friends. And while I was away, I started bleeding, and this wasn't my first rodeo. I knew what was happening. And so I went to the hospital to get an ultrasound done, because I wanted to know whether or not I needed to book in to get a dilation and curette, or if things were passing, quickly. And the doctor did an ultrasound at that point and said, the fetus is still alive, the baby's still there, we can see a heartbeat. So it looks like, yes, you're probably miscarrying the baby, but there's nothing we can do about it for now. Fingers crossed, it's just a bleed and everything will be okay. Fast forward 3 days and I'm back in Melbourne, and my current obstetrician is on holidays, so I book in to see his fill-in. And the obstetrician does another ultrasound and says, "I can't see a heartbeat, but you're in that 6-week period where maybe the heartbeat hasn't developed yet, so we still can't say for sure." And I said to him, "Understand that. However, I had an ultrasound on my holiday at the hospital, and there was definitely a heartbeat then, and there isn't one now. So can we please do a dilation and curette," which, if you're not familiar with that, is a procedure where they dilate the cervix and remove the contents of the pregnancy in surgery. And the reason why I wanted that was because they'd finally agreed to do some genetic testing of the fetus to see if there was something happening from a genetic perspective that was causing the miscarriages. The obstetrician refused because he kept saying, "I don't know whether or not this baby is going to live." Now, I'm not an obstetrician, but I don't think babies come back to life after their heart stops beating. And I said to this obstetrician, "Okay, fine, you're not going to do the dilation and curette." I just wasn't in the mental space to have that fight with him. I said, "How do you propose that we test the DNA of this baby?" And his suggestion to me, remember, this is an obstetrician, qualified person, said to me, "What you're going to do is you're going to get a sieve, and you're going to put it in the toilet, and every time you go and do a wee, you'll wee through the sieve, and that way you can catch anything that might come out, and then you can put it in a little Ziploc bag and bring it in for us to test." This is what he told me. And so for 3 weeks, I did this, and it was as horrifying and awful and traumatic as you can probably imagine that it was. And during this time, I was in excruciating pain because my body wasn't processing the miscarriage. I ended up going back to emergency and was admitted to do a dilation and curette. They finally agreed to do it, and went in, had the procedure done, woke up the next day. And mind you, this was the second time I'd had one, because I had one for my very first miscarriage. So I knew the drill. I knew, a little bit of tenderness, but the bleeding goes away really, really quickly, within a matter of days. But this time around it didn't. It just continued on and on and on, and it was not showing any signs of slowing down. So 2 weeks passed, and I called up my obstetrician, who was now back working again, and explained what had been happening. And he said, "Come in for an ultrasound and we'll just check that nothing's going on." He he did the ultrasound, and I can still remember the look on his face when he said to me, your ultrasound like lit up with blood supply. He said, I'm obviously not going to say that they didn't do the dilation and curette, but I've never seen anything like this after one. So I had to go back in again, and for the second time in 2 weeks, go under general anaesthetic and have a second dilation and curette done. And this time he went in with a camera to make sure that he got everything out, and that everything looked good. Because he went in with a camera that time, he found a very small fibroid, like the size of my little fingernail. And he said, it's very, very small, unlikely to be the cause of the miscarriages. It was in a position that can cause problems, so I took it out, but I really don't think that was probably related, but it's gone now. Which was, I was like, okay, great. At this point, it's been 2 years and I've had zero information about what could be causing this, so maybe that was it. At this point, it's probably important to mention that in the years leading up to my first pregnancy and miscarriage, my periods had been getting significantly worse. They were incredibly heavy. They lasted for a long time. They were painful. There were clots. It was a whole deal, and it wasn't fun. So the very last miscarriage and the 2 dilation and curettes that happened within a 2-week space of each other was in January of 2017. So fast forward to April of that year, and I find out I'm pregnant again. And this time the pregnancy went full term, and I now have my eldest child. And so that was kind of the end of the miscarriages. And when he was about 2 years old, I fell pregnant again with my daughter. And again, that was a full-term healthy pregnancy. And I never got an answer about why 6 pregnancies in a row, ended in miscarriage. And then I had 2 that were completely fine. That is until today, when my doctor called me to talk about the results of a pelvic ultrasound that I had done last week because of some abdominal niggling pain that I'd been experiencing. So my doctor, being brilliant, said, let's just order an ultrasound just to check that, there's nothing to worry about. So I find out in this ultrasound that I have something called adenomyosis, which, if you're not familiar with adenomyosis, it's a condition where the endometrial lining, so the lining inside the uterus, starts to grow into the walls of the uterus. And it can cause all of the symptoms that I was experiencing with my periods when I was having the miscarriages. So heavy periods, long periods, painful periods, clotty periods, all of these things are associated with adenomyosis. The ultrasound technician also suspects that I have endometriosis, which is a separate condition where tissue that's really similar to the endometrial lining of the uterus grows elsewhere in the body. And this can cause fertility issues, and it can cause painful periods, heavy periods, although less typically heavy periods, but a lot of the same symptoms that, again, I was experiencing during this 2-year. And she said that, while we can never answer these questions with 100% certainty, it's very likely that, yes, I had adenomyosis and endometriosis all those years ago, and they were probably the most likely factors in the recurrent miscarriages that I had. Now, during those 2 years, I never had a comprehensive pelvic ultrasound done. Knowing what I know now, I probably would have requested one had I been experiencing this now, but you can only do the best with the information that you have at the time, and I just wasn't aware. And when I think back to the medical gaslighting that I received, the amount of times I was dismissed and told that it was all in my head, there wasn't anything going on, there were no further tests that they could run, at not any point during those years did a medical professional ask me what my periods were like. And had they asked me that one simple question, there would have been very obvious information to help point them in the direction of a diagnosis, and they would have been able to better support me and potentially avoid some of those miscarriages. So please, if you are currently dealing with the medical system and you know in your gut that something isn't right and you're not being listened to, please go and find someone else who will listen to you, because your concerns are valid. You know your body better than anybody else does, and you deserve to be listened to.